There was something unnervingly cold about the sound of his shoes against the polished lobby tile, sharp, echoing, too precise, like a ticking metronome marking the seconds before a storm. He moved with a kind of confidence that wasn't earned, just worn like a brand new suit. No greetings. No smile for the receptionist. Not even a nod to the security guard who buzzed him through. He walked in like he already owned the place. Technically, he did. His name was Christopher Rains, our new CEO, 30-something, probably fresh out of whatever leadership accelerator they're feeding these tech geniuses through nowadays. He had that ambitious gleam in his eye, the kind that says he's convinced the world is just waiting for him to restructure it. The announcement had come exactly 1 week ago, delivered through one of those overly sweetened internal memos, the kind that smells like perfume sprayed over a landfill. A bold new chapter in leadership, it had said. I'd been around long enough to read between the lines. If you like this story and it touches your heart, let us know in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to give us more motivation to create better content. 17 years with a company teaches you to recognize what transition actually means. Someone up top wants to cut throats, but never their own. From my office, a glass-walled little corner tucked far enough away from the clamor of interns and overly caffeinated marketing assistants, I watched him make his entrance. Not quite an executive suite, but I had privacy, clarity. You learn to observe before you speak in environments like ours. That day, I watched him walk the floor. No knocks, no introductions. Just walking into rooms mid-meeting, flipping open his sleek little tablet, firing off questions without waiting for answers. He smiled when people stumbled. Not cruelly. No, it was worse. Like he had already decided their fate and was enjoying the show before the curtain dropped. He didn't stop by my office. Didn't even glance my way. I wasn't on his radar yet, and that was just fine by me. Better, actually. At lunch, a few of us, older employees who didn't feel the need to wear noise-canceling headphones and sneakers to look busy, gathered in the break room. Someone joked that Christopher reminded her of a substitute teacher who thought he could fix the entire school system in a week. We all laughed, but softly. Carefully. I stirred my tea and kept my thoughts to myself. I've outlasted 3 CEOs. One left for health reasons, another due to legal trouble, and the last because he tried to outsource more than he understood. All of them wore expensive suits. All of them thought titles meant wisdom. They made the same mistake over and over, assuming experience came with a corner office instead of years in the trenches. Later that afternoon, I passed him in the hallway. He looked at my ID badge briefly, then right through me, as if I were part of the wallpaper. He didn't stop to ask what I did. Didn't know that I was carrying the quarterly performance briefs that he'd likely quote in his Friday update. I was just another face, part of the machinery. Not worth noticing. But I noticed him. There was a shift happening so subtle most people would have missed it. Like the way the air feels just before a thunderstorm breaks open the sky. Nothing obvious. Not yet. But it was there. The nervous chatter had died down. Managers stopped making eye contact. Linda, the HR director who'd been around almost as long as I had, looked paler than usual. And quieter. I returned to my office and closed the door behind me. There's a particular stillness that settles into a place right before everything begins to fall apart. I knew it too well. It hums beneath the surface, calm until it isn't. That week passed like water slipping under a closed door. Slowly, quietly, deliberately. Nothing explosive. No layoffs, not yet. But the meeting started, closed-door sessions, whispered conversations in hallways that silenced the moment someone in a tailored blazer walked by. I kept my head down, as always. I sent updates to our partners in Shenzhen. Scheduled the next video call with gold peak text smoothed over some accounting hiccups in Mandarin. Routine things, on the surface. But I could feel the current changing. Christopher moved like a cold front through every department. Fast, sharp, and oddly cheerful. People laughed nervously when he passed, smiled too wide, talked too fast. The energy had shifted, and not in a good way. And somewhere deep down, I knew what was coming. I just didn't know yet how close I already was to the eye of the storm. At first, it felt like nothing was happening. That's how these things always start, quietly, like water creeping into the foundation. No official announcements. No town halls. Just more of those closed-door meetings and hallway conversations that died mid-sentence the moment someone in heels or a slim-fit suit walked by. I kept doing what I'd always done, kept my head down, kept my emails polite, kept the gears turning. I coordinated with Gold Peak Tech in Shenzhen, like clockwork. Sent bilingual updates. Smoothed over a missed invoice in Mandarin with the kind of grace only years of diplomacy can teach. I didn't see Christopher often, but I heard his name like a cold draft moving from room to room. He was reorganizing departments, asking a lot of questions with very little patience. He wanted numbers, not context. Results, not relationships. And it wasn't long before the first names started disappearing from email threads. Mid-level managers, people who'd been with the company 15, 20 years, were called into short meetings and then they were just gone. No farewell messages, no retirement lunches, just the sound of packing tape on cardboard boxes and the quiet clicks of security badges deactivated. The worst part wasn't the firings. It was the replacements. Fresh-faced hires with immaculate LinkedIn profiles showed up in their place, people who could speak in acronyms but needed basic functions explained twice. They made offhand jokes about how old school our systems were, as if the tools we'd used to build the company into a global name were some kind of punchline now. They called it modernization. I called it what it really was, a slow-motion disaster. And I watched it all unfold in silence. There's a strange kind of discipline that comes from surviving long enough in corporate life. You learn when to speak and when to disappear into the background. I knew better than to raise concerns. I'd seen men like Christopher before, men who mistake silence for agreement, not survival. They never notice the one sitting still in the fire. Until it's too late. It was during a Thursday morning team meeting when I first felt it in my bones that this wasn't just another shakeup. This was dangerous. Christopher was at the front of the room, all swagger and polish, clicking through slides faster than anyone could read them. He threw out phrases like efficiency models, cost centers, and agile transformation. Buzzwords dressed up as strategy. "We need to be leaner," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're focusing on strategic partnerships and eliminating waste. Every department will be evaluated." He didn't look directly at me when he said it. He didn't have to. I glanced around the room. Some of my colleagues shifted in their seats. Others sat perfectly still, eyes blank. When the meeting ended, people filed out like they were leaving a funeral. I gathered my papers slowly. Not the first to leave. Not the last. And then, just as I turned to go, I felt him beside me. "Ellen Carter, right?" Christopher said, his voice casual, like he was trying to place a name he'd once skimmed over in a report. "Yes," I replied. He gave me that same surface-level smile I'd seen him hand out like candy. "What exactly do you handle again?" I could have recited my job title, listed my department, rattled off my deliverables like a resume. But I knew it wouldn't register with him. "I manage our communications with Gold Peak Tech," I said carefully, "and other strategic partners in China. I don't just translate, I manage relationships. Business etiquette, cultural expectations, negotiations. It's a bit more involved." His brow furrowed for a heartbeat. "We have someone doing translations, don't we?" That was it. That single sentence. I felt a chill beneath my collar. Not from fear. From clarity. He didn't understand. Worse, he didn't want to. He nodded, already half-turned toward the door. Good, good. We'll be streamlining a lot of processes soon. Appreciate the work you're doing." And then he walked away, not even noticing the fluorescent hum in the room or the fact that Linda, the HR director, hadn't made eye contact all morning. Back at my desk, I passed her on the way. She gave me a small, tight smile. The kind that says be careful. I sat down, opened my laptop, and started writing a routine status update for Mr. Ling at Gold Peak. But my fingers hesitated above the keyboard. For the first time in 17 years, I wasn't sure how long I'd be allowed to keep doing even that. Friday came with the scent of rain and something heavier, dread. At 10:15 a.m., an email pinged into my inbox. Subject line: meeting request, Christopher Rains, 10:30 a.m., Conference Room B. No agenda. No explanation. Just a time, a place, and silence. Like a verdict waiting behind a closed door. And just like that, the house I'd helped build brick by brick, year by year, began to tremble. At 10:15 a.m., the email arrived like a stone in the gut. Just a single line. Meeting request, Christopher Rains. Time, 10:30 a.m. Location, Conference Room B. No subject line fluff. No context. No explanation. Just a time, a place, and that name. I sat frozen for a moment, staring at the screen. My hands were folded neatly in my lap, almost instinctively, as if order could somehow shield me from what I already knew. I stood, smoothed the hem of my jacket, and walked to the conference room with the quiet calm of someone stepping into a storm they've seen coming for miles. Every step was deliberate, steady, not rushed, not weak. That was important to me for reasons I didn't even need to explain to myself. Christopher was already there when I arrived, sitting at the head of the table like a king playing house. A beige folder sat in front of him. Linda from HR was 2 chairs down, her expression carefully emptied of anything human. She avoided meeting my eyes. "Ellen, good to see you," Christopher said, too brisk, like he was getting through a checklist. He gestured toward the seat across from him. "Please have a seat." I sat, calm, composed. My hands rested on the table like bookends. He opened the folder and flipped to a sheet without looking up. "We've been reviewing our internal structure over the past few weeks," he began, his voice as smooth as a stone polished in a river, "and after careful consideration, we've decided to consolidate certain functions." I didn't blink. "Your role, while valuable in the past, is no longer aligned with the direction we're moving in. We believe the external firm we've partnered with for language services can cover the needs we have moving forward." A pause, just long enough for the blade to finish falling. There's simply no longer a requirement for a dedicated liaison. I didn't speak, didn't flinch. I just listened, the way one does when standing in the ashes of something they built with their own hands. Christopher softened his voice, or tried to. "Of course, we appreciate your years of service." That shallow smile again. "HR has prepared a severance package, 2 months' pay plus any accrued vacation. It's very fair." Linda reached across the table with the envelope, beige and heavy like a tombstone in paper form. I didn't touch it. Christopher leaned back, misreading my silence as resistance. "I know this may be difficult, but change is necessary for growth." I looked at him for the first time since I entered the room. Really looked. There was no depth behind his confidence. Just the shiny surface of a man who'd never been tested by anything that couldn't be solved with a PowerPoint and an assistant to print it. "You're certain you can manage without me?" I asked, my voice level. "Even." He chuckled softly, with the kind of arrogance that comes from never having had to earn the right to laugh. "We'll be just fine," he said. "We need to be more dynamic, more streamlined. It's nothing personal." Of course it wasn't. To him, I wasn't a person. I stood, leaving the envelope untouched on the table. I looked down at him, really looked, and saw a boy playing dress-up in a boardroom he didn't deserve. "Well," I said simply, "I wish you good luck on Monday." He blinked, puzzled. The specificity caught him off guard. But then he smiled again, the same glossy mask. "Thank you, Ellen. Best of luck to you as well." I walked out of that conference room without turning back. Past Linda's averted eyes. Past the curious stares of coworkers who didn't need to ask what had just happened. They already knew. Down the hallway that had once felt like home, familiar, stable, mine, and now just felt like a corridor I'd outgrown. Outside, the clouds had thickened. They pressed low over the city, like a warning. As I stepped into the lobby, the first drops of rain began to fall. I didn't stop. I didn't cry. I didn't even let my hands shake. By the time I reached my car, the rain had picked up. Not a storm yet, but close. The windshield blurred, colors melting into watercolor. I sat there for a while, gripping the steering wheel, letting it settle in. 17 years. 17 years of building trust, learning nuance, navigating cultures and business etiquette that Christopher hadn't even begun to understand. I wasn't just a name on a spreadsheet. I was the bridge between two worlds. And they decided a freelance agency with a generic email address could replace all of that. They thought they were ready. They weren't. And I knew that Monday would prove it. The weekend that followed was oddly quiet. Still even. Like the hush after a door closes behind you. I cleared out my home office, answered a few messages from the brave ones, former colleagues who hadn't gone silent with fear. The rest said nothing. Not a word. I didn't blame them. On Sunday night, I opened my laptop and updated my resume. It wasn't an act of desperation. It was a declaration of value. If you like this story and it touches your heart, let us know in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to give us more motivation to create better content. 17 years had given me something no title ever could. Reputation, respect, relationships. Those don't vanish just because someone in a blazer decides your salary is inconvenient. Monday morning, while the city woke under the heavy gray of a rain-soaked sky, I dressed in a crisp navy blouse, slipped my portfolio under my arm, and walked into an interview at Lawson and Reed Global Consultants. An old colleague from an industry conference had reached out almost immediately after hearing the whispers about what had happened. They needed someone who could manage East Asian business partnerships, not just translate but understand. Someone who spoke more than the language, someone who understood the culture beneath the contracts. The meeting was professional but warm. Mr. Reed himself shook my hand. He asked sharp questions, but he listened to my answers like they mattered. I hadn't felt heard like that in years. By the time I returned home that afternoon, I had an offer in my inbox. Better salary. More autonomy. A position where I wasn't holding the pieces of someone else's mess. I was building something new. I accepted without hesitation. Meanwhile, Ridgemont and Wallace buzzed in the distance with the kind of nervous energy you can feel even through a screen. Text trickled in from the brave few. "He's calling you a social climber now," one said. "Said you were trying to stay relevant." "They replaced you with a rotating team in Singapore," said another. "No liaison anymore. Just whatever contractor happens to be online that day." I read the messages. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Christopher didn't understand the value of patience, of diplomacy, of consequence. But he would. Soon. The strange thing was how calm everything felt. The weekend after I was let go, my world didn't fall apart. It settled. I cleaned out my home office like I was clearing a guest room for something better. I brewed tea, folded laundry, answered a handful of texts from former coworkers, the brave ones who still had enough spine to check in without worrying whether HR was tracking their phones. The others? Silence. A heavy, echoing kind of silence that speaks louder than any memo. I didn't blame them. I knew how fear worked in environments like Ridgemont and Wallace. You kept your head down, kept your voice low, and hoped the axe didn't swing your way. Sunday night, I sat at my kitchen table and updated my resume. Not out of panic. Out of principle. 17 years of work didn't vanish because someone with no understanding of relationships thought a language services firm could replace nuance. I hadn't been a translator. I had been a bridge. That distinction meant everything. Even if no one inside that glass building could see it anymore. On Monday morning, I didn't linger in bed or cry over coffee. I put on a sharp navy blouse, tucked my hair back neatly, slipped my portfolio under my arm, and stepped into the offices of Lawson and Reed Global Consultants. The space was sleek and sunlit, buzzing just enough to feel alive, but not so much it drowned out thought. A former industry contact, someone I'd once shared a long dinner with at a business summit in Tokyo, had reached out the moment the rumors of my dismissal hit the circuit. "They let you go?" she texted. "That's going to hurt." And she was right. Not just because I had the knowledge or the language skills or the cultural fluency, but because I had something the Christophers of the world couldn't fake on a spreadsheet. Trust. The interview wasn't stiff or mechanical. It was respectful. Mr. Reed himself greeted me at the elevator. He asked thoughtful questions, not just about performance metrics or KPIs, but about the subtleties of managing East Asian partnerships. About tone, ritual, timing, about how things were said, not just what was being said. I hadn't realized how much I missed being in a room where people actually listened. By the time I got home, there was already an offer waiting in my inbox. Competitive pay, more decision-making power, and the freedom to build something meaningful without chasing the whims of someone else's ego. I accepted it before dinner. And while I sat in my quiet apartment, the city flickering outside my windows like a map of possibilities, I let myself feel it. Not triumph, exactly. Not yet. But something just as satisfying. Vindication. Meanwhile, the static around Ridgemont and Wallace was shifting. I could feel it, even from a distance. My phone lit up with scattered messages, some panicked, others veiled behind passive gossip. "He's spinning the story now," one of them wrote. "Said you were clinging to relevance. A gatekeeper who couldn't evolve." I stared at the screen, lips curling slightly. Relevance? I hadn't wanted power. Or a spotlight. I'd wanted competence. And respect. That's all. But that was exactly what terrified men like Christopher the most, people who didn't want credit. Just results. They brought in a firm from Singapore. Another message came through. No dedicated liaison. Just rotating account managers. He says it's more efficient. I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. So they'd done it. They'd taken the bridge and tried to rebuild it with scaffolding. Replaced consistency with contractors. Relationship with automation. And Monday was coming. That was the part no one ever teaches these young execs. That in business, as in life, the fallout doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it creeps in slowly, through misread cues, mishandled etiquette, missed deadlines that used to be invisible because someone like me prevented them. I didn't say a word. Didn't reach out. I didn't have to. Storms don't need announcements. They just need pressure. And pressure was building. By the time Thursday rolled around, the storm had a name. Gold Peak Tech. I knew the schedule. Knew the delegation from Shenzhen was flying in for a meeting that would decide a multi-million-dollar contract renewal. I also knew who wasn't going to be in the room this time. Me. And that mattered more than Christopher could possibly understand. I sat at my new desk at Lawson & Reed, coffee warm in hand, eyes on the window. Somewhere across the city, Christopher Rains was about to learn that bridges aren't optional. That respect is a currency. And that when you treat loyalty like a line item, you bankrupt yourself. He thought he'd erase me with a signature. But some names linger, even after they're gone from the payroll. And soon, the company I'd helped build would feel the difference between a partner and a placeholder. The seed was already planted. Now, I just had to wait for it to bloom. Monday morning arrived cloaked in corporate theater. Blazers ironed sharp, coffee in hand, faces stretched into artificial alertness. The kind of day that looked ordinary on the outside but carried a tremble underneath, like a structure straining under invisible cracks. Inside Ridgemont and Wallace, a handful of executives gathered on the 15th floor, waiting for what they thought would be a routine meeting. The kind they'd sat through 100 times, charts, projections, firm handshakes. But this one wasn't routine. Not even close. Gold Peak Tech's delegation from Shenzhen was due in under an hour. The contract on the table wasn't just another renewal. It was the renewal. A 3-year extension worth over $24 million, one of Ridgemont's foundational deals. The kind of contract that could float or sink a company's quarterly projections, not to mention its international credibility. I knew all of this, of course. I'd been the one nurturing that relationship for nearly 2 decades. And now I was gone. Christopher Rains sat at the head of the polished glass table, pen in hand, glancing at the clock every few seconds. His sleeves were perfectly rolled, his smile prepped and polished. To his left sat Martin and Carla, 2 of his freshly imported hires, impressive on paper, eager to please, and hopelessly out of their depth. Across the city, in the warm, sunlit office of Lawson & Reed, I sat quietly at my desk, sipping coffee. I didn't need to check the clock. I knew exactly what time it was. At 10 a.m. sharp, Gold Peak's delegation arrived. Mr. Ling, their Vice President of International Affairs, flanked by 2 senior advisors. They walked into the room with the understated poise of people who understood power didn't need to announce itself. Their presence alone shifted the air. Formal, watchful, measured. Christopher stood immediately, his grin stretching a little too wide. "Welcome, welcome," he said, extending his hand like a game show host. "We're so glad to have you here." There were handshakes, stiff, without bows, without small talk. That alone should have told him everything he needed to know. But he didn't notice. Or maybe he did, and didn't understand. He launched into his presentation as if he were pitching a new mobile app, buzzwords ricocheting off the conference walls like rubber bullets. Efficiency metrics, synergy frameworks, agile modernization. He didn't pause for reactions. Didn't wait for translations. Just powered through the slides like he was running a sprint. Mr. Ling sat silently, his face unreadable. He let Christopher speak for nearly 10 minutes before calmly raising a hand. Christopher stopped mid-sentence, mid-slide. "We would like to speak with Miss Ellen Carter," Mr. Ling said, his tone polite, firm, and absolutely final. The room went still. A silence thick enough to choke on filled the space. Martin shifted in his chair. Carla dropped her pen. Christopher blinked, faltered. He began, clearing his throat. "Ms. Carter is no longer with the company. We've recently transitioned to a new, highly efficient communication structure." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. Mr. Ling turned to his advisors, shared a brief, deliberate glance, and then looked back at Christopher. "Miss Carter was not a translator," he said. "She was our partner. She understood not just our goals, but our values, our culture, our unspoken expectations." Christopher laughed lightly, nervous now. "I assure you, sir, our new systems are just as capable, if not more so, of meeting those expectations." Mr. Ling raised a hand, barely, but it silenced the room like a bell ringing in a cathedral. "You have made a grave mistake," he said flatly. The words fell like a stone on glass. Firing Miss Carter was not just an error in judgment. It was a show of disrespect toward her and toward our relationship. Color drained from Christopher's face. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Martin looked down. Carla fiddled with her tablet, like she wanted it to vanish. "There will be no renewal of our agreement at this time," Mr. Ling said, rising. "We value respect above all else. You have shown us none." And just like that, the entire delegation stood and walked out. Their heels clicked sharply across the marble floor, echoing louder than Christopher's opening welcome. No one in that room moved. No one had to. An hour later, the news had spread like wildfire through the building. No gold peak contract. No deal. $24 million gone. By lunch, the CFO had called an emergency board meeting. Investors were asking questions. Department heads were scrambling to control a story that had already written itself. Christopher tried to spin it, of course. He blamed unexpected cultural rigidity. Claimed the Singapore agency had miscommunicated key points. Even suggested the Gold Peak team had been reluctant to embrace innovation. But the truth had a way of leaking through the cracks. He called Ellen incompetent. Someone whispered outside the elevator. Said she was just riding on tenure. Didn't really do anything. He really thought a freelancer could replace 17 years of trust. He's finished. Across the city, I finished a call with a new client, logged my notes, and stretched back in my chair. My phone buzzed with messages. Updates. Gossip. Apologies dressed up as concern. I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't have to. I hadn't lifted a single finger. They had done this to themselves. And the storm had only just begun. It didn't collapse overnight. No, Ridgemont and Wallace fell the way most things do, first slowly, then all at once. In the days following the failed Gold Peak meeting, the building shifted. You could feel it. The energy inside those sleek, sterile walls turned from stiff professionalism to full-blown panic. People walked faster, talked less, laughed in short, clipped bursts that didn't reach their eyes. The emails became tighter, sharper, heavier with CCs and legalese. Managers held sudden meetings behind closed doors. HR started showing up in rooms they rarely visited before. And the whispers, they multiplied. You couldn't get to the coffee machine without hearing someone mutter about contingency plans or reforecasted projections. They didn't say my name, but they didn't have to. The void I'd left behind had grown into a chasm. One by one, the dominoes fell. Smaller international accounts began to freeze their renewals. Some withdrew entirely, quietly terminating contracts with polite explanations that didn't explain anything. But I knew. Vendors began demanding tighter payment terms. A German client pulled out of their fourth quarter expansion with no notice. And a major European partner? They paused all pending deals after hearing rumors of internal instability. The once bright hires Christopher had paraded around like trophies were suddenly scrambling to hold onto meetings they couldn't navigate and clients they didn't understand. One of them, Carla, emailed a former colleague of mine asking what respectful closing gestures looked like in a Korean negotiation. They were Googling etiquette that used to be second nature to me. It would have been funny if it weren't so sad. Inside Ridgemont, morale wasn't low, it was obliterated. There was no trust left in the floorboards. Only survival instincts. Budgets were slashed. Bonuses reconsidered. Performance reviews pushed to an indefinite quarter. Christopher started showing up early and staying late, always with a new initiative or framework in hand. But no one bought it anymore. His speeches grew longer, his confidence thinner. He blamed the economy, then the market, then inflexible legacy clients. But never himself. He couldn't. Meanwhile, I worked methodically. I didn't brag. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I just picked up the phone. Quietly. Precisely. I reached out to 2 former partners, not directly, of course. I knew better. These weren't email conversations. These were small touches. Hints. A well-timed word through mutual connections. I didn't pitch. I didn't sell. I simply made it known Lawson and Reed valued relationships. Stability. Cultural fluency. Continuity. The things that had once been dismissed as outdated rituals at Ridgemont, they were respected here. And that's all it took. By the second Friday, 2 more major accounts slipped from Ridgemont's fingers and landed quietly in ours. No press releases. No noise. Just silent signatures behind closed doors. I received one email from a nervous assistant still working under Christopher. Would you be open to a conversation about helping rebuild confidence with our Southeast Asian contacts? I didn't respond. The irony wasn't lost on me. After being called irrelevant, now I was being asked to steady the very ship they'd pushed me overboard from. Late that Friday afternoon, a message came through from the CFO's office. It was worded like a standard financial update, but the subtext was deafening. All new business initiatives will be temporarily suspended pending review. Translation: we're bleeding. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. That was the moment I knew it was time. Time to close the loop. Not with vengeance, but with precision. That Monday, I requested a meeting with Christopher. He accepted almost immediately. Desperation has a way of making even the proudest men pick up the phone. We met in the same glass conference room where he had handed me my severance just weeks before. The symmetry of it wasn't lost on either of us. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. The expensive watch was still there, but it didn't carry the same authority. His face was drawn, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. "Ellen," he said, forcing a smile, voice artificially bright. "I'm glad you reached out. We really need your insight now more than ever. I think, maybe, we can turn this corner together." I raised a hand. He stopped talking. "I'm not here to advise you," I said calmly. "I'm here to tell you this is the end." His eyes flickered. He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance. "You fired me without understanding what I did. You replaced me with someone you didn't vet. You dismissed 17 years of work as if it was fluff. You told the board I was clinging to relevance." I leaned forward, my voice low, my words deliberate. "You were wrong." He shifted in his chair. "Ellen, look, I know it got messy, but I'm the reason Gold Peak Tech pulled out." He stopped. His mouth fell open slightly. I'm the reason Lawson and Reed is signing the accounts you're losing. His hands trembled. You did this, he whispered. I tilted my head, still calm. I didn't sabotage you. I didn't lie. I didn't twist arms. I simply reminded people what respect looks like. They made their own decisions. He sat there, blinking, the gears in his head trying to catch up to what his ego wouldn't allow. I stood and gathered my folder. I didn't come back to save you, I said softly. I came back to make sure you knew exactly who dismantled your little empire. He stood too, unsteady on his feet. You'll regret this, he said, the words more air than threat. I smiled, genuinely, not cruelly, just with the kind of peace that comes from finally being seen clearly. No, I said. You will. And then I walked out. I didn't look back. Not at Christopher. Not at the office. Not at the slowly sinking ship they still called a company. Some endings don't need fireworks. Sometimes, it's enough to leave quietly while the fire consumes everything they thought they controlled, and know that you were the one holding the match the whole time. The first rule of revenge, real revenge, is patience. Not noise. Not drama. Not screaming in the parking lot or storming into boardrooms with righteous fury. No, revenge done right is quiet. Surgical. You don't charge back in swinging. You wait until they invite you back. And then you bring the knife in your smile. After our meeting, I let Christopher stew. I gave him time to hear the silence of that empty boardroom echo back at him. And sure enough, 2 days later, I got the call. He didn't even pretend it was a surprise. Ellen, he said, voice chipper and too fast, like he was swallowing nerves. We're hoping you might consider coming back. On a temporary basis. Just to help ease some of the transition pains. Transition pains. That's what he called the chaos. I'm listening, I said evenly.
Great.
Fantastic, he said, relief crackling through the phone. We'd love to have you consult for a few weeks. No official title, of course. Just assist with some of the overseas accounts, offer guidance. No title. No public recognition. No apology. He wanted my help without my dignity. I'll meet you at 9 a.m. tomorrow, I said. My office. There was a beat of hesitation. Your office. At Lawson and Reed. I could hear him nod through the line, his silence thick with humiliation. Of course. See you then. I hung up. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the rain tapping lightly against the windows, and thought carefully about what I wanted. Not rage. That part had passed. This wasn't about bitterness anymore. This was about truth. The next morning, I chose a simple navy dress. Minimal jewelry. Nothing performative. I wasn't dressing for him. I was dressing for precision. Christopher arrived 10 minutes late. Just long enough to look busy. He came in with the same smug watch on his wrist, but it didn't shine the way it used to. Confidence hung around him in tatters. Ellen, he said, stretching a smile over his face like worn leather. Good to see you again. I offered a cool handshake and gestured to the chair across from me. He sat, launching straight into his pitch. There were challenges, he admitted. A few temporary misunderstandings with partners. A need to smooth things over. No need for titles or structures, just someone who knew the terrain. A fixer. A ghost. He never said failure. That word still caught in his throat. At the end, he spread his hands. We just need someone familiar with these clients to step in. You know, repair the lines of communication. Quietly. I let the silence thicken between us. You're offering me a consulting role? I said finally, with no formal acknowledgement, no authority, and no correction of the lies you spread when I left. He flushed, a flicker of red high on his cheekbones. It's not personal, Ellen. It's just business. That's when I smiled. A tight, razor-thin smile. So is my answer. His brows knit together. I don't understand. I'll consider your offer, I said smoothly, standing. But on my terms. He blinked. What terms? You'll see. Because I didn't need a title to pull threads. I didn't need a nameplate on a desk to dismantle what he'd built out of hubris. What I needed was access. And now I had it. That Friday, He signed a short-term consulting agreement. Hastily, of course. Barely skimmed it. Just wanted my name on a dotted line before his world crumbled any further. And with that, I re-entered the building I'd once called home. No announcements. No welcome back email. Just a quiet corner workspace between two departments. Clear glass, no walls. A reminder. I was here, but I wasn't back. Perfect. By noon, I had access to the client database. By afternoon, I had my old reports. And by the end of the day, I reached for my private phone, the one no one at Ridgemont had ever known about, and dialed a number I'd saved years ago. Mr. Ling answered on the second ring. "Miss Carter," he said, warm but wary. "To what do I owe this call?" I switched to Mandarin, my tone soft, respectful. I apologized for my sudden departure. I explained, without embellishment, without emotion, what had happened. How I'd been dismissed, replaced. How the relationship was recategorized as a cost. There was a long pause on the line. Then he asked simply, "Are you calling on behalf of Ridgemont?" "No," I said. "I'm calling because I believe you deserve the truth. And because I respect what we built." Another pause. Then a quiet chuckle, not mocking, but knowing. "I see," he said. "Perhaps it is time we consider new partners." "I leave that to your wisdom," I replied. "But I would be honored to work with you again." We ended the call with deliberate formality. Nothing casual. Every word is measured. That weekend, I arranged a quiet introduction between Mr. Ling and the executive team at Lawson and Reed. No press release. No headlines. Just a single, significant conversation in a conference room. Back at Ridgemont, the damage kept spreading. Christopher was putting out fires with gasoline. His new hires couldn't speak the language, literally or metaphorically. His leadership team was fractured, whispering behind closed doors. Contracts were bleeding out like slow leaks in the hull of a ship no one knew how to steer. And me? I was planting roots in a company that understood value didn't come in slides or sound bites. It came in trust. This wasn't vengeance anymore. This was reclamation. Justice, delivered slowly, precisely. And soon it would be complete. If this video has brought you deep reflections and a sense of peace, don't forget to hit like to show your support and appreciation. Share your thoughts in the comments, because every share, every story can be a source of inspiration and light for those around us. Subscribe to the channel to continue exploring and learning about profound spiritual values, so that with each passing day, we grow closer to awakening in life. Share this video with those you care about, because a small light can illuminate an entire sky. Let's spread love and peace together.